It's that time of the year again. Snow is falling and you start hearing Christmas music wherever you go. In the spirit of this, I thought I'd make a video about the most festive game I could think of. See, it's festive, it's got some good snow. Anyway, recently I've been playing Red Dead Redemption 2 way too much, so I think I have to make a video about it. This game is known for a bunch of things, like the realism, open world, and attention to detail. All of these things are great and all, but I think the main reason why this game is still relevant today is the story. When a game has a story that's this good and gameplay that's this fun, most people would want a sequel of some kind. Years ago, when the only Red Dead Redemption was the first one, a sequel didn't really feel possible, because, But a few years later, they did what seemed impossible and made Red Dead Redemption 2. Now you go back and play as this new guy that totally wasn't made up for this game and definitely was always a member of the game that they had in mind, totally. Because they made a sequel when it seemed impossible before, it kind of makes me go, maybe they could make another one. But also could they? Can they really make another? Or have they told all the stories that there are to tell about the Vanderlyn gang? There's a few options for what could happen in a sequel game, and I think the first thing to figure out is a time period for this game to be set in. I think the first obviously wrong answer is 1914. This is when you take control of Jack in the first game and kill Mr. Dumbass Evil Government Guy. While it might be cool to see Jack find some sort of redemption after becoming what Arthur, Abigail, and John tried to make sure he didn't turn into, I kinda like that the game ends where it does, and it's up to our imaginations on what happens next. Also, 1914 is the year that World War I started, and in the next game, I don't want to be running around Blackwater with an AR trying to get kill streaks or something. Also, if we start with Jack, we're barely connected to the other games. Jack's in both of the other games, but he's a little baby in those. Look at him. Aww. But more importantly, everyone else is old or dead by the time Jack's all grown up, so this would feel so disconnected from the other games. And to put the nail in the coffin for this idea, Arthur was saying that the time of Outlaws was over in 1899. 15 years after that would be way too late for an Outlaw game to take place. Just may as well make a different game at that point. The next time period that could maybe work is sometime between the two games. The epilogue in Red Dead 2 did this, and it was pretty great. You get to reunite with Charles and Uncle, you get to kill Micah, and best of all, you build a house. That was all fun or whatever, but what else happened in this time period? Well, the problem is, for John, nothing happened. He was literally just chilling. This is the time period where he decided to change his ways and become a good man. I don't think you could really make a third game with any of the characters in the gang during this time period because none of them really have any redemption arc that happens. Dutch kinda does, but I don't think he should be a playable character in any of these games. Trying to figure out who he is and why he does what he does is so much fun, and if you took that mystery away by letting the player decide what he does, it would be pretty lame. A cool spin-off game where you play as Javier in Mexico during this time period could be a fun idea for a game, I think. It would also make his death in Red Dead 1 a little more sad and make John's story even more impactful. Javier would be a better pick than Bill or something because Javier isn't really all that bad of a guy, where on the other hand, Bill is kind of an ass. This time period seems interesting on the surface, but when you realize John is boring for this whole time and, Arthur's dead, there really isn't a game here. So, how about before the events of Red Dead Redemption 2? This is much more interesting because we still are in the era of outlaws and cowboys and stuff, and we actually know some of the things that happened during this time period because they tell us. This is also kind of the problem with the prequel idea though. We already kind of know everything. When you play Red Dead 2, you know that John's gonna live because he's in the first game. Spoiler, I'm sorry. But outside of that, and the gang falling apart obviously, we don't really know anything else. For a prequel that happens before Red Dead 2, we already know what happens to Colm and Dutch, we already know how the gang is formed for the most part, we already know about Arthur's relationships. This obviously isn't everything that the game needs to be though, so it's still possible that there's more things to tell. A big problem with having another prequel is that the story would need some sort of ending. And the first ending that I could think of would obviously be the Blackwater job. This massacre has been talked about a lot in both of these games, and nobody has given a straight answer on what exactly happened. John was even there, and you play as him in both of the games, and they don't really even tell you what happens. It's a mystery on purpose. This mystery is interesting, and I think it definitely should stay that way. No matter what actually happened and how crazy it would be when they showed it to to us, it wouldn't live up to this mythical event that we just hear about. So there's really no reason to show it, and if they did, I think it would take away one of the most interesting parts about these games. So a full prequel really wouldn't work either, huh? So I just said basically there isn't any time period that the next Red Dead game could be set in and would make sense. So why am I still talking? Well, first of all, I think more Red Dead content is still possible. Another Undead Nightmares experience in Red Dead Redemption 2 as DLC would be incredible. The game is still so popular today, so other than the fact that Rockstar is working on the most anticipated video game of all time, I don't see why they wouldn't just drop everything and work on Undead Nightmares 2. I do think that Red Dead 2 will still be a relevant game in another 5 years, so if they want to come out with Undead Nightmares in 2030, I'm here for it. Also, if they wanted to have a smaller team work on that spin-off I talked about earlier, that would be awesome. I don't need some massive, huge, crazy, elaborate story every time, so if they just scaled it back and released a smaller game that was still in this time period but wasn't necessarily Red Dead 3, I wouldn't be mad. So why isn't this video over yet? It seems like I've talked about every single way Red Dead 3 would be impossible. So I actually have 2 ideas on what Red Dead Redemption 3 could actually be, and you guys in the comments could decide if either of them are actually compelling enough to make it Red Dead 3. My first idea stems from when Molly tells Dutch that she's a rat. Then Arthur's like, "Dutch, come on buddy, you know she's not worth it." And then Grimshaw and Dutch are like, "You know, she knew the rules." Like, Arthur, what are you talking about? To me, I was thinking, well, how did they actually have rules for this in the first place? Well, it turns out there used to be a traitor in the gang, and he was killed. When I found out about this, I was like, what did this traitor actually do? I kind of want to know. In the next game, you could play as that traitor. It could be like at the start of the game, you go around doing stuff for the gang like you did in Red Dead 2, and similar to Red Dead 2, you become more estranged from the gang as the game goes on. But the difference this time is that you don't have your little group of friends in the gang to fall back on, like how Arthur had Charles, John, and Sadie. Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2 have some sort of redemption arc for the playable character to go on, and I think this next game would be no different. Say Dutch has the gang do something questionable, but it seems fine in the ends justify the means type of way, and then this traitor has to do something deplorable. The redemption arc in this game could be the traitor trying to fix his mistake, and the game could end with a confrontation with the gang in the camp where the traitor is killed. This would obviously go over some things that everybody knows that happens, but there's a lot of details to fill in. Also, Blackwater wouldn't be a problem because the game would end before the whole Blackwater stuff even happens, so that's great. I probably didn't explain that idea as best as I could, but that would be my first idea. My second idea would probably work better and makes a little bit more sense for the story. I mean, that's not really saying much because my first idea was kind of a reach anyway. For this idea, I think the game should be set in 1898, 1899-ish, and we are still with the Dutch van der Linde gang. I think the game should start when they first meet Micah, maybe? This would be cool because you could meet Jenny and see what her and Lenny were like. You could also see what the Callander boys were actually like. You know, beyond this. The first couple chapters of this game could be similar to the ones at the start of Red Dead 2, where the gang is trying to get some money, get that one big score, and whatever Dutch's plan is. He's always got a plan, right? Well, towards the halfway point of the game, Dutch and Micah have a very interesting plan. They want to rob the ferry coming into Blackwater. I know I said earlier it would be bad if they showed the Blackwater massacre, but just stick with me here. Also, you might be assuming we would be playing from the perspective of John or Arthur, but I'm actually thinking of something a little more interesting. I think it would be really cool if we played as Mac Callander. We never see him. He isn't even in the second game at all, he's only mentioned. His brother actually gets way more screen time than him. You don't even get to see his face, but what you do get is stories from the other members of the gang. Uncle says he saw him beat up 15 people at once. Now that kinda sounds like a video game main character to me. Charles says he was a violent man. Hosea said Mac threatened to kill an entire town before. This sounds like the kind of maniac that I would want to play as. Anyway, where was I before I got in a tangent about Mac? Oh yeah, Blackwater. So yeah, I want that to happen in the middle of the game, but I don't want them to show it to you. Basically, I want them to show you all the parts of it going well, like they get onto the boat and stuff and the money, and then bang, Mac gets shot or knocked out or something, so you don't see the rest of it. I think that's the best way to keep what happens a mystery. You might be thinking though, isn't that where Mac dies? Well, it is according to Agent Milton. But what if he was just lying to Arthur about that? Maybe Mac was in prison or something and Milton didn't want the gang going after him. Maybe Mac escaped, but Milton was just covering his ass. I think Milton lying here would not only be so cool because it would allow this game to be possible, but it also makes Red Dead 2 even more interesting because what if he was lying at the end about Micah? I mean, he isn't, like, he's totally not. But it would be really interesting to have that uncertainty around if Milton is telling the truth or not. Speaking of interesting characters, I talked about how Mac seems to have this crazy temper and stuff, but he's more than just a rage monster. Bill and Uncle talk about how Mac had more to him than just this brutal exterior and was actually a layered person. This would be super interesting to explore, and a traumatic event like Blackwater could bring that interesting side out of him. If Mac found out about his brother being killed and basically his whole family abandoning him, I think it would change him a little bit as a person. Both of the Red Dead Redemption games have something to do with redemption. I don't know exactly what the redemption part could be, but it could possibly have something to do with him being a rage monster before, everything happened. Also, the second half could expand the open world and take us to new places in the world of Red Dead, like, the West Coast. So that would be cool. This idea isn't super fleshed out or anything, I just thought something like this would be pretty cool. So yeah, that was my idea about what Red Dead 3 could be. I didn't mention it throughout the entire video, but I am aware that Red Dead Revolver exists. I just don't really know how to include it in a video like this. Anyway, what are some of your ideas about what Red Dead 3 could be? Do you actually think playing as Dutch would be such a bad idea? What do you think of my idea? How are you doing? What's your favorite color? Can you like and subscribe, please? Anyway, I think that's all I've got for this video.
Okay, I'll catch you later then.